At 6:30 a.m. on September 22, 2025, U.S. surveillance systems flagged a new contact in the Caribbean Sea. Radar operators watched as a Venezuelan speedboat tore across open water at full throttle. Twin outboard engines screamed, carving bright white scars into the dark blue surface. On board were armed men, confident they were running another routine smuggling run fast, familiar, and profitable. They had no idea the ocean around them was no longer open. The moment their engines roared to life, they entered a carefully constructed surveillance and targeting network designed to make escape impossible. What looked like freedom was already a trap. High above, American satellites locked onto the boat's thermal signature, tracking the heat from its exhaust as it cut across the sea like a glowing arrow. Every course correction, every surge of speed was monitored and logged in real time by analysts thousands of miles away. At 25,000 feet, a U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft circled silently. Its advanced radar swept vast stretches of ocean, capable of detecting even small, fast-moving vessels. The Poseidon didn't just follow the speedboat's path, it listened. Every radio transmission sent back to Caracas, including encrypted bursts, was intercepted, captured, and archived. The smugglers believed their communications were secure. In reality, their messages were being analyzed and fed into the Navy's combat data network before the transmissions had even finished sending. On the horizon, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer closed the distance. To the men on the speedboat, it was invisible, no more than a faint smudge against the sky. To the U.S. Navy, however, the outcome was already decided. The destroyer represented far more than raw firepower. Displacing over 9,000 tons, it carried a dense array of sensors, radar systems, and weapons designed to dominate an entire battle space. By the end of the day, the speedboat will be gone. Caracas would call it an act of war. Washington would describe it as a counter-narcotics operation. And the world would watch a smuggling interdiction spiral into an international crisis. The Venezuelan crew never had a chance. From the instant they accelerated, they had entered what the U.S. military calls a kill box. The term isn't dramatic, it's doctrinal. A kill box is a zone where surveillance assets, targeting systems, and firepower overlap so completely that escape is impossible. Once a target enters, destruction is no longer a matter of if, but when. The kill chain began in space. Beyond visual imaging, satellites track electronic emissions, heat signatures, and even faint hydrocarbon traces in the boat's exhaust. Each data point added another layer of certainty. The speedboat's top speed, nearly 50 knots, meant nothing in a battle space where information traveled at the speed of light. The Poseidon formed the next layer. More than a reconnaissance aircraft, it functioned as an airborne command post. Its sensors could detect vessels the size of a small skiff from hundreds of miles away. Every time the smugglers altered course, the aircraft adjusted, maintaining unbroken contact. Its passive surveillance systems absorbed every transmission from open voice calls to encrypted data bursts, tagging them for intelligence databases. On the surface, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer maneuvered into position. Its weapons suite included 96 vertical launch cells capable of firing everything from Tomahawk, cruise missiles to SM-series interceptors, an overwhelming arsenal against a fiberglass speedboat. But firepower wasn't its primary role. The destroyer's true value lay in the Aegis combat system. Its SPY-1 radar fed targeting data into a shared network linking ships, aircraft, and command centers into a single operational picture. This was what surrounded truly meant not a visible ring of warships, but an invisible web of sensors, radars, and fire control solutions that erased every possible escape route. North, south, or west toward Venezuelan waters, the smugglers' options had already been calculated and eliminated. When the order came, there was no chase and no warning shots. The Poseidon transmitted final target confirmation. Inside the destroyer's combat information center, systems aligned and fire control solutions locked in. Seconds later, a precision strike obliterated the speedboat. The fiberglass hull vanished in a flash, reduced to burning debris scattered across the water. For the U.S. Navy, It was a textbook operation. For the men aboard the boat, there had never been a realistic chance of survival. Within hours, the Pentagon confirmed the strike. The official statement framed it as a counter-narcotics mission, claiming the vessel was directly linked to Tiburon de Aragua, Venezuela's most powerful criminal syndicate. Intelligence suggested the boat carried narcotics and cartel operatives preparing for regional distribution. 11 suspected operatives were reported killed. President Donald Trump publicly highlighted the incident, calling it a demonstration of America's resolve to strike cartel-linked actors wherever they operated. In Caracas, the response was immediate. President Nicolas Maduro condemned the strike as an act of aggression and a violation of sovereignty. He argued that Venezuelan citizens had been killed without due process and that the operation breached international law. The debate quickly widened beyond drug enforcement. Analysts warned of the precedent being set. If major powers began sinking vessels in international waters based solely on suspicion, global shipping lanes could become de facto free-fire zones. Allies offered no public support, but within defense circles, concerns about escalation grew. For the Pentagon, however, the true value of the operation went beyond the destruction of a single speedboat. Every smuggling run is also an intelligence opportunity. The Navy had recorded every communication between the smugglers and their handlers in Venezuela voices, frequencies, encryption patterns. Routes, fuel logistics, and onboard equipment were all cataloged. This data fed into what analysts call pattern-of-life intelligence, allowing predictive models to be refined. How do smugglers behave when they know or suspect they are being watched? Do they race toward territorial waters or attempt to blend into commercial traffic? Which frequencies do they rely on when they switch to encrypted bursts? Each answer makes the next interdiction faster, quieter, and deadlier. The method extended far beyond narcotics interdiction. When Venezuelan F-16s later conducted aggressive low-altitude passes over the USS Jason Dunham, U.S. destroyers did not respond with force. Instead, they logged radar profiles, flight behavior, and radio traffic, turning a provocation into a valuable intelligence dataset. When Chinese Z-1 or helicopters harassed patrols in the South China Sea, their electronic fingerprints were quietly archived. Even Houthi militants in the Red Sea, firing shoulder-launched missiles, unintentionally reveal infrared plume characteristics unique to their systems. Every encounter, no matter how hostile, became an intelligence harvest. The September incident triggered immediate political fallout. Within hours, President Nicolas Maduro appeared on Venezuelan state television, condemning the strike as murder and framing it as a violation of national sovereignty. He pledged retaliation. For a population already strained by sanctions and economic crisis, the narrative fueled nationalist sentiment. Maduro placed the Venezuelan armed forces on alert. State media broadcast images of aging F-16s, towering up on deteriorating airstrips, and coastal troops marching along the shoreline. To domestic audiences, the message was defiance. In reality, Venezuela's Air Force suffered from severe shortages of spare parts and maintenance capacity. Its Navy was incapable of contesting U.S. dominance offshore. Caracas could not confront Washington head-on, but it could provoke. 3 days later, that provocation arrived. 2 Venezuelan F-16s executed a low-altitude flyby of the USS Jason Dunham in international waters. Pentagon officials labeled the maneuver reckless and dangerous. Sailors on deck reported shockwaves rippling across the sea as the jets passed overhead. Venezuelan state media portrayed the flyby as a show of strength. To the U.S. Navy, it was something else entirely, an intelligence opportunity. Radar signatures, communication patterns, and tactical behavior were all recorded, strengthening future American capabilities. But the risk of escalation was real. U.S. Navy rules of engagement require restraint unless directly threatened. Yet supersonic aircraft can close distance in seconds. A misinterpreted radar lock or an accidental weapons release could have ignited open conflict. Washington's response went beyond words. Within a week, 10 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters were deployed to Puerto Rico. Unlike Venezuela's 1980s-era F-16s, The F-35 represents fifth-generation warfare designed to penetrate defenses, suppress threats, and strike targets before adversaries even realize they are being tracked. The message was unmistakable. The United States was prepared to escalate. Across the region, governments from Colombia to the Lesser Antilles expressed unease as American warships and aircraft increased patrols. Shipping companies rerouted traffic to minimize risk. Diplomats warned that what began as a counter-narcotics strike had rapidly evolved into a geopolitical flashpoint. By the end of the first week of September 2025, the Caribbean appeared calm on the surface. Merchant ships continued their routes. Waves rolled across open water. But beneath that calm, the balance of power had shifted. A single speedboat operated by smugglers who believed they were untouchable had pulled Venezuela and the United States into direct confrontation. For the smugglers, the sea represented freedom. For the U.S. Navy, it was a controlled environment, a fully mapped battlespace where satellites, patrol aircraft, and destroyers operated as one. Modern warfare no longer depends on warning shots or prolonged chases. It relies on precision networks where escape is structurally impossible. The destroyed speedboat was more than a smuggling vessel. It was a signal, a test, and ultimately a trigger. For Caracas, the incident became both humiliation and propaganda, fueling speeches and state broadcasts. For Washington, it reinforced the Navy's role as both enforcer and intelligence collector. And for the world watching, it highlighted a dangerous precedent. In a single morning on the Caribbean Sea, the line between counter-narcotics enforcement and state-level confrontation blurred. So what do you think? Did Washington's decision demonstrate necessary resolve against cartel-linked operations, or did it risk escalation far beyond the original target? Share your view in the comments. If you found this breakdown informative, like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis. And if you want to support the channel directly, consider joining our community. It helps us continue producing in-depth coverage of critical military events worldwide. Because as this incident shows, when you gamble against the U.S. Navy, escape is never an option.